everybody. I am Michelle Tennant. I am the president of the Henderson County Beekeepers Association. And recently I went to our state conference here in North Carolina with the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association. And I saw on the stage with our professor, Dr. Tarpey, who we all fundraise here in the state of North Carolina to fund an endowment that he sees. And what he's been busy doing this summer is overseeing a program called Be More. And these students were presenting at conference, and I thought, oh my gosh, first of all, they're all female, yay females. And secondly, these would make great YouTube videos. So that's what we're doing. And we have a whole playlist. And today's feature is Allison Huddleston. So Allison, tell us all about yourself.
Hi, so happy to be here. My name is Allison Huddleston. I'm a rising senior at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm majoring in environmental management systems with a minor in philosophy. And I've gotten pretty into sustainable agriculture just kind of over the course of all the things I've been studying about the environment. And that's what kind of led me to be really interested in pollinators and go ahead and take this internship.
It's really fantastic. So Allison's going to share the exact presentation that she shared at the summer conference. So take it away, Allison.
Yes, let me go ahead and get that pulled up. All right. So this summer, I was working under Dr. Hannah Levinson and Dr. Elsa Youngstedt, and the question that we were asking was, how does pest management actions impact stem nesting bees in blackberry cropping systems? And the story of this research actually starts with fruit flies and not with bees, because for blackberry cropping systems in North Carolina, beekeepers have to really intensely manage this pest called the spotted wing Drosophila. And this pest mainly targets ripe, soft-skinned fruits, especially blackberries. And that means that growers have had to go from applying maybe just a couple insecticide applications per season to up to maybe 20 in one season. And of course, this made us start to wonder how this is going to impact the non-target organisms in that ecosystem, including pollinators, which are very important for the pollination of the blackberry crop. And one such pollinator that we were looking at was a stem nesting bee under the genus Seratina. And this bee functions quite differently from honeybees. They're a solitary bee, and they build their nest by chewing a hole through the soft center of a stem, and they really do favor blackberry stems. So they'll chew through and then lay this linear nest. And the picture here, you can see that they have their little pollen nectar ball. They lay their egg on that, and then the egg will use that as food to develop and eventually emerge as an adult bee from that stem.
Do you
And
know, Allison, if that is that similar to how a carpenter bee functions? Do you know?
yes, actually, and the genus Seratina is so often the common name would be the small carpenter bee. So they function similarly to carpenter bees.
Yeah, here in Western North Carolina, in where I am in Henderson County, we have a lot of carpenter bees.
Oh
So
yes,
yes,
they
yeah,
like swing sets, picnic benches. Yep.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so similar to that. And because they build their nest in such close proximity to these insecticide applications, they use, the pollen from the flowers inside their nest, and some species will even use chew up little pieces of leaves and kind of cap the end of the nest. They're using all of these plant parts that have been likely applied with at least have some residue of insecticide on them. And so we were worried that both the adult bees and the developing offspring inside the nest have a risk of exposure to insecticides. And we wanted to know, how is this going to affect their development? How is this going to affect their reproductive success? And we studied this by taking field samples from 3 different sites. We had a no insecticide input site, we had a low input site, and then our high input site really just represents typical commercial blackberry management. And so we pulled samples of these stems out of the field across 3 months in May, June, and July. And so basically we would look for a stem that had stem nesting insect activity. We wouldn't always be sure that it was a Seratina nest, but we would look for a little hole at the end of the stem, clip those out of the field. bag them up and bring them back to the lab. And then once we got back to the lab, we would split those open, and you can see in one of these pictures is just the cross section of what a developing nest would look like. And so when we did that initial opening of their nest, we would count how many eggs, larvae, essentially just track what life stages were there at the start. And then we would close them back up, put them in the incubator, and periodically we would check on them again to open them up and see, okay, have any of these developed into the next life stage? And if there was adults ready to emerge from that stem, we would also capture those so that we could later weigh them, identify them, and kind of see what species were present. And another interesting thing that we looked at is we would take samples of the pollen from those nest provisions that were kept inside and look at that under the microscope to see how much blackberry pollen versus other types of pollen were present, to kind of like see, you know, how much they're really relying on blackberry pollen for their nest.
And is there damage, before we get into the results of what you found, do you find that the blackberry farmers themselves are wanting the pollinators there, or they're like trying to put the insecticides on there to get rid of the pollinators inside the stems?
They certainly do want the pollinators there. So number one, these bees don't hurt the plant at all. They generally go for, they want to build their nest in kind of old and sort of dried out stems, and they don't like to build their nests in that healthy green tissue. So they're not harming the plant. And in fact, prior research done by the lab I was in indicates that these bees also do contribute to the overall pollination success. And having more of these bees there does contribute to better yields and more blackberries. So they're important for pollination services.
Fascinating. Okay, what did you find?
So we found that, well, the good news was that across all 3 sites, we didn't find a statistically significant difference in just the overall survival,
Everybody.
indicating that there probably wasn't any, you know, very severe acute impacts that was just like decimating these bees. So their overall numbers were similar across sites. But what we did find was that there was a general trend that from May to July, the adult female weights were increasing, but at our highest insecticide input site, those weights actually dropped off in July. And we were thinking that this could possibly indicate some sublethal effects of insecticide exposure. So over the course of a whole season, by the time it reaches July, that's when they would have been exposed to the most amount of insecticides at that point. And for our highest input site, that might indicate some kind of effect where it's impacting their reproductive success. So, you know, these results are pretty important to contribute to the overall body of research, telling us how we can both balance the goals of wanting to maintain biodiversity and pollination services and protect our bees, but there's also the important side of wanting to protect our crops and have economically viable agriculture. So the more we know here, the more we can kind of work on creating these best management practices to help both keep pests away from our crops, but also protect our bees.
So in this graph that you found here, it is interesting. Just looking at the low input and the high input, did that surprise you?
It did surprise me because at the low input site, there certainly was still the application of these insecticides. And I don't have the exact numbers of how much lower their inputs were. But it is good to see that reducing the input of insecticides, even by a little bit over a couple years, is helping these bees potentially. This is something that, you know, we would want to investigate further to really make sure that that's what's going on. But it's certainly exciting to see that, you know, farmers can have a lower input program and see that that's helping the bees.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. Did you have another slide?
No, that's the end of my slides.
Oh, got it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this biodiversity and the crop protection. So I think that, I have a homestead, I don't have a farm, and I have berries on my farm or my homestead. So I'm thinking about what did your results tell you about the use of insecticides? Like I'm of the opinion, like I don't want to do anything that's extra or unnecessary. However, when you are trying to protect the crop itself, a lot of farmers believe that it's essential from your just your lab and the conversations that you all had. What would you recommend to farmers and homesteaders and beekeepers about, because if there's no big difference, it's got to be used because it's making a difference with crop protection, even though it's not making a huge difference in anything other than our female birth, and reproductive ability. What do you recommend to us from this, from your, just, this is your opinion, right? I just
Mhm.
want to know.
Yeah, I'm
But I
definitely of
should
the
not spray my
opinion.
berries.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the opinion that it's a balance, right? I think for, home growers and homesteaders, it might be easier to use some of these kind of regenerative practices because you're on a smaller scale. You can invest more time into less land and kind of really try to use more sort of natural like pest management methods. Um, but when you get to these like bigger, like huge sites where the growers are really relying on this as their livelihood, um, at that point, it is important to make sure that you're having, doing what you need to do in order to produce a crop that's sellable, right? And if that means using some amount of insecticides, I think that that's okay to do because, of course, we need to have secure food systems, but if we can reduce our inputs as much as we can and try to incorporate as much as possible some of these lower risk and more preventative measures rather than relying entirely on insecticides, which are more of should be used as more of kind of like not prevention, but rather an intervention at that point.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so just
So
making sure that we're keeping track of what the pest numbers are there and kind of trying to get ahead of a problem.
So preventative measures more natural, but sometimes the all right intervention to save a crop is necessary, is what I'm hearing you say. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe some things like using cover crops or hedgerows, or other sort of good land management practices, can help to with some of these like pest management methods rather than jumping straight to that intervention stage.
Hmm, that's great. Yeah, I think that's sort of a through line with all of your cohorts in these interviews that I've been doing. Um, that there's not. I think that when I started as a beekeeper, I'm a second generation beekeeper, and I'm always you know,
Mhm.
anti-chemicals, right? Things of that nature. However, just like we do with our own bodies and medicines, right? For the most part, great, get your sleep, eat well, do the natural things, get your exercise. And sometimes you do need an intervention. You do need a medical, pharmaceutical intervention. Here, we're talking about the same sort of thing on a broad scale when we're talking about land management, crop management, and pollinator protection. So it's really fascinating to me. So where can people reach you, Allison, if they want to ask you more questions?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is a great way to reach me. And my LinkedIn link is just the beginning portion and then Allison Huddleston.
Yeah, and we're taking a picture of it right here. Allison, can you see your LinkedIn? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the correct one.
Okay, great. So you all can connect with her on LinkedIn. And I just really appreciate your time today and going over your presentation with us. And what's next for you? What can we expect from you?
Yeah, as I'm entering my senior year now, I'm looking into possibly going to graduate school, and I really liked the pollinator work that I did, so I'm hoping to kind of stay in this area of sustainable agriculture, making sure that we're really managing our land in the best way possible to protect the bees.
Do you think you'll become a beekeeper?
I do like the honeybees. Yeah, even though that was not so much the focus of my research this summer, I had the opportunity to help with a couple, honey harvests or, just general beekeeping. And that was pretty enjoyable. So, yeah, once I have my own place and a place to put it, it would be awesome to be a beekeeper.
Yes, that's, I loved any female that I meet and getting them into beekeeping. I love hearing that. So, whether you become a beekeeper or not in the future, thank for the work that you're doing to protect pollinators overall. And we wish you the best. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for talking with me today.
My pleasure.